a lot higher than that. Many of these failures can be traced to very poor leadership decisions, inadequate strategic planning, and an inability to adapt to evolving market conditions. And one compelling example of the importance of strategic adaptation is that of Amazon. We see that if you're not able to adapt, to a large extent, the failure rates are high. And so we experience what, if you Google it, is called the refugee effect, where because of high unemployment, refugee effect means a lot of people now run into being self-employed and creating their startups. But the problem is, do they have the right expertise, leadership capability for the long haul? And that's what this is about. And the person that will be taking us through this, which I'm excited about, is another subject matter expert. Remember that, again, if you go to the link, the 111th episode already there, just go to www.echoicenter.com/webinar. You will find all the previous recordings we've had, scaling your business, business model canvas, things around route to market, go-to-market strategies. 111 episodes are there. Feel free to read, to listen to them. And if you have questions, drop it to any of us to respond to in the Telegram page where we are together. And so this makes the 112th episode, and I'm excited because we have another subject matter expert in the house. And it's an honor and privilege to have him. He's a guest speaker. And is the director of Innovation Junkie. And when you hear the word Innovation Junkie, I'm sure you understand what it means. These are people that internalized fully the concept of innovation, where he partners with C-suite leaders and business executives to help scale their organizations and develop disruptive solutions tailored for today's complex challenges. When we talk of complexity of VUCA, it cannot be crazier than this. We thought we had seen it all when COVID came and shut down the whole world. And then we talked about supply chain linkages. And then we started talking about high inflation. And so, the last 5 years, there's nothing as crazy in our world of VUCA like we've seen, and there are regional tensions everywhere. So again, for startups and business leaders, this is a very complex world and challenging world. But that's where people like our facilitator today come in to bring value. With more than 3 decades of experience across multiple industries, he has established himself as a thought leader in strategic growth, innovation, and leadership. His passion lies in empowering individuals and organizations to pursue extraordinary growth through strategic innovation and purposeful leadership. And when you have innovation and leadership come together, then definitely you see phenomenal growth happening. His extensive work with businesses, of course, he works with businesses to foster scalable growth and navigate industry disruptions, making him a perfect fit for today's discussion. We're excited to have him share his insight and strategy with us as we consider the topic, future-proofing your startup, leadership and strategy for long-term success. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Jeff Stratton as he takes over the platform this afternoon, and he takes us through his presentation. Jeff, thank you very much for honoring our invite this afternoon. You have the floor.
Victor, thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all, and I look forward to sharing some information with you, and I look forward to interacting with you a little later as we do some Q&A as well. So as Victor said, I'm Managing Director of Innovation Junkie, and I also serve in a couple of other capacities as well, Managing Director of Conductor, which is really more of an early stage startup, what we call an entrepreneurial support organization. We run an accelerator called the 10X Growth Accelerator. Our Innovation Junkie business is really focused on more scaling and larger organizations. And then I have the privilege as well of running a small venture fund called Cadron Capital Partners, where we get the opportunity to invest in a number of the companies that we come across through our work. Today, I want to talk about future-proofing your startup, and I really want to focus that conversation around 3 major aspects of future-proofing your startup, and that's leadership, it's building a culture of excellence, and systematizing your growth strategy. Those are the 3 things that I want to talk about today, and then we'll open up the floor for some questions as well as we continue working through that. So I've had the privilege of working with individuals, teams, and organizations literally all around the world. And during my early academic days, when I was a professor at the University of Arkansas system, I studied excellence among individuals, teams, and organizations as well. And I got the opportunity to take that globally around the world, working with individuals, teams, and organizations as I did mergers and acquisitions and actually new startups in geographies from 7 different countries in Europe, China, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and Brazil as well. One of the things that I learned, regardless of the size of your company, regardless of whether you're an individual contributor, a team leader, or a leader or executive of a large organization, I learned that leadership drives success. And I use this definition of leadership that's on my wall in my office. I use it with my students. I use it with my clients. And that is that leadership is the most important requirement for business and personal success. In simple terms, we define it as the willingness to be held accountable for results and then to fulfill that responsibility no matter what the external situation, circumstances, or pressure. I'll talk about the concept of 100% accountability in a few moments, but future-proofing your startup really begins with making sure that you've surrounded yourself with the right leaders in that organization, that you yourself are the right leader for that organization, and then you've adopted this culture of making sure that everyone in the organization submits themselves to being held accountable for results, and they never trade results for excuses. Vitally, vitally important. As I studied leadership, I also have come to know that leadership also requires a very delicate balance, and that is a balance between results and relationships. If we are focused on results at the expense of relationships, we will experience wild success very, very quickly until we begin to alienate everyone around us who's responsible for helping us maintain those results, and then we lose them both. By the same token, if we focus on relationships but pay no attention to results, people will love us and respect us for a period of time. That is until they lose that respect for us because we aren't accountable and cannot deliver consistent results. And then once again, we lose them both. So effective leadership really requires this ability to walk the tightrope, if you will, between results and relationships, understanding that each of us probably has a tendency or a bias toward one or the other. When we recognize that we've become slightly out of balance, we take the necessary steps to get back in balance. That's a critical aspect. When we think about success at the organizational level, and this can be at the team level or at the larger organization level, my experience is that all organizations have some resemblance, if you will, of this triangle of purpose, strategy, and culture. Purpose being who they are and where they're going as an organization, what they're trying to accomplish, why they exist. Strategy being what the business decisions they've made in terms of the fields that they've chosen to play on and the games that they're choosing to play on those fields because they know they can win. And then finally, culture, and we're gonna dive into culture a little bit. I follow the writings of a number of management thought leaders, one of whom is Peter Drucker, who says culture eats strategy for breakfast. It matters not how strong of a plan you have. You can have the best strategy and the best plan of any of the companies in your market, but if you do not have a strong, positive, consistent culture, it will literally consume all of the best laid plans that you've developed. It will literally consume your strategy and make it impossible for you to achieve the results that you're looking to achieve. There's some compelling facts and statistics out there about culture and employee engagement that I think are worth sharing with you all. Back in the 90s, when I first got involved in business, the 1990s, that is, culture was something that most executives, most startups, and most leaders really delegated to the human resources function. They said culture is something that they deal with. But the reality is that strong, positive cultures have been positively correlated with significant increases in revenue, significantly greater profit, 30% higher customer satisfaction, lower health-related costs for the organization, and also lower absenteeism. By the same token, weak or poor cultures or negative cultures have been correlated with a significant increase in employee turnover. Disengaged employees cost organizations 34% more than their fully loaded annual salaries. So if you think that you're paying one amount for the salary, you're actually paying 34% more than that based upon the disengagement of employees. And disengaged employees also have more accidents and more errors and defects as well. But that begs the question, if culture is so vitally important to future-proofing your business and to making your business more profitable and more growth-oriented, then that begs the question, what exactly is culture? You know, culture, if we define it, it refers to the shared values, the shared beliefs, attitudes, behaviors that characterize an organization. In addition, it encompasses the unwritten rules, the norms, and the patterns of behavior that shape how we interact with each other as employees, but also how we approach our work, how we make decisions in an organization. Effectively, it's the collective personality of an organization. Everything about an organization makes up its culture. Whether we state the values or we don't state the values, whether we have written the norms and behavior patterns down or we've not. It's how we feel on a on a Sunday evening when we're getting ready to drive into work the next morning. It's how we feel on a Friday afternoon at the end of the work week when we're ready to go home. Those point to the culture as well. And there's this concept called an espoused culture and the culture in use. And the espoused culture is the culture that we say we have, the culture that we desire to have. And the culture in use is the culture that we actually have. And in most organizations, those are seldom the same thing. We often think that our culture is far better than it actually is. But the overarching goal over time is to make sure that the culture that we actually have is the culture that we talk about. And the culture that we talk about is the culture that we actually have more often than not. And so building a culture of excellence requires effort. At the end of the day, culture is about human behavior. It's about individual human behavior, and it's about collective or organizational behavior. How can we influence the behaviors of the people in our organization to drive the kind of a culture that we espouse so that that becomes our culture in use as well? That's one of the critical questions that we'll be talking about today. After working with hundreds of organizations on 5 continents around the world, I have come to observe that there are about 6 elements in organizations that achieve sustained strategic growth, organizations who have effectively future-proofed their organizations. There are about 6 elements that I find that point toward this culture of excellence that they have created within their organizations. And I'd like to walk through those individually now, if we can, briefly. First of all is strong leadership. Cultures of excellence, organizations who have cultures of excellence are very, very deliberate about selecting leaders for that organization. They are leaders that are bought into the core values of the organization. They are leaders that are willing to lead by example. They are leaders who are willing to buy into the strategic direction of the company and make sure that others throughout the organization are bought into, first of all, that they understand that strategic direction and that they're bought into it as well. I spoke about core values for a couple of moments. The core values are what we refer to as the behavioral guardrails of an organization. Many times we see them written on placards or written on banners and posters and placed all around the buildings where we work. But core values only become core values when we and all of the leadership in the organization are willing to live by them. Not only are we willing to live by them organizationally, we talk about them frequently in organizational meetings. We recognize people according to how they behave relative to our core values. We use them to recruit and select new employees. We talk about them when we onboard new employees. We use them to evaluate employees on a daily basis in terms of how they're living how they're living up to those core values. We use the core values to promote leaders, and we refuse to promote leaders who blatantly defy core values. One or more of the core values. Not only do we refuse to promote them, if someone in the organization blatantly defies one or more of the core values, we're willing to actually terminate them from our organization and invite them to pursue opportunities in someone else's company. If we're not willing to do all of those things based upon the core values, then we have to ask the question, are they really core, number one? Or are they just nice words and flowery posters that we paste on the wall? And the final question we have to ask is, do we really have all the right leaders in place? So strong leadership is the first cornerstone to creating a culture of excellence. The second one is clarity and focus. We know where we're going as an organization, and we know how we're going to get there. And not only do we have clarity and focus, we make sure that our employees understand where we're going as a company, what we're trying to accomplish as a company. And we also ensure that they understand how their individual roles actually contribute to the direction of the company as well. We have engaged and committed teammates. In the United States, we use a statistic that says that employee disengagement is one of the single greatest expenses that American companies are experiencing today. Disengagement basically means that someone decides to quit, but they continue staying with the organization. They continue to be employed. They just don't do their work every day. They perform at less than 100% productivity, 75, 65, 50%. So strong leaders not only drive clarity and focus, they underscore that individuals in the organization really embody how their jobs contribute to the success of the organization, and they work to ensure that those employees remain engaged and committed to the core values, committed to the strategic direction, committed to the clients, and committed to the overall business strategy. Many times they do this by ensuring, as strong leaders, by ensuring that the organization has an environment where communication is empowering. The concept of empowering communication, that's our fourth element of the culture of excellence. The definition of the word empower literally means to make someone stronger and more confident in dealing with the circumstances that they're facing. So communication that is empowering is in fact communication where the person with whom we're communicating feels stronger and more confident in dealing with the circumstances they're facing than they did before we had that communication. Now, I may still have to have a tough conversation with them given the circumstances that's requiring that conversation, but I don't end that conversation until I try to leave them feeling more empowered than before the conversation. The fifth element is 100% accountability. I talked about that a few moments ago. The very definition of leadership that I use is someone who's willing to submit themselves to being held accountable for the results they're required to deliver, no matter what the external circumstances, situations, or pressure. 100% accountability means when I say I'm going to do something, I do it, period, full stop. At the very first moment that I recognize that I may be at risk for doing what I said I was going to do, I go to the person with whom I have a commitment and I talk with them about it. And I try to see if the deadline that we've agreed to is a hard and fast deadline, or can we negotiate that? What I don't do is wait until the deadline passes and just pray and hope that they don't ask me about it. 100% accountability, therefore, is kind of like integrity. I was in the medical field for a number of years, and in the medical field as a paramedic working on the streets, whenever we would come up on whether it's an automobile accident or some type of injury, we would talk about the integrity of the skin or the integrity of the bones. If they had lost their integrity, they were broken. A broken bone has lost its integrity. The word integrity means to make whole. The word integrate means to bring together. The word disintegrate means to break apart or to tear apart. So therefore, the word integrity itself means whole. When our deeds don't match our words, not only do we not have 100% accountability, we don't have integrity. So when we think about accountability as synonymous with integrity, it takes on an entirely new meaning. And then finally, the last aspect of an organization that embodies a culture of excellence is organizational agility. The boxer Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And invariably, organizations and individuals get punched in the mouth by unplanned circumstances. It could be a pandemic. It could be a new competitor enters the market. It could be a change in the economic circumstances of our geography. It could be a product failure or a service failure. All individuals and all organizations experience setbacks, unplanned circumstances, and we must have the ability individually and as organizations to bounce back from those unforeseen circumstances, to be agile, to think ahead, to try to mitigate risks that we have as a company. And so organizational agility is that last element. My experience is that companies that put these 6 elements together and work consciously to cultivate these aspects throughout their organization do a much better job of future-proofing their organizations than organizations that do not. But it's not enough to just have strong leadership. It's not enough to build a culture of excellence, even though both of those are vital elements to future-proofing your startup. We also have to have a system. James Clear in the book Atomic Habits said, we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. Now, I'm a goal setter. I'm a goal planner and I'm a goal setter. And I have seen the magic, sometimes the almost divine magic that can occur when we set a goal and we write it down. But I also know that those goals are subject to our whims. Many instances, they're subject to our distractions. And it's not until we build the disciplines and the systems around the achievement of those goals that we really experience consistent success. And that brings you to the strategic growth system that Innovation Junkie has that I want to spend a little bit of time talking with you about. We'll take about another 10 minutes to talk through this, and then I want to take a break for some questions and field questions from the listeners. A few points about strategic planning. I don't really even use the word strategic planning very often because it has such a bad reputation. So many organizations do strategic planning so badly. So I talk about strategic growth plans or a strategic growth system. A compelling strategic growth plan not only fuels collective effort, it actually properly limits distractions. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Many strategic plans are heavy on the plan part, but they're not very heavy on actually articulating the business strategy. Strategy can be difficult because it's not certain. A plan is certain, but a strategy is based upon our observations. It's based upon our experience. It's based upon our research. It's based upon what we think is going to happen and how we believe we should respond. What it attempts to articulate is strategy attempts to say, these are the fields that we choose to play on. These are the games that we choose to play on those fields. And we choose these games on these fields because we're confident we can win at those games on those fields. So that can be, here are the geographies that we tend to operate in. Here are the products and services we choose. Here are the types of clients we're going to go after. All of those things can be the equivalent of fields and games that we're talking about. But strategy is uncertain. It's based on our experience and our collective expertise. It's how we think we should respond. While it's not uncertain, it is critical that we make some educated guesses about our strategy. But more about strategic growth planning is that we don't allow any three-ring binders. And that's because most badly done strategic growth plans are done. They're 3 inches thick. They're in three-ring binders that get put on a shelf and then forgotten about for the vast majority of the year. A strategic growth plan that has high quality will say as much about what an organization's not going to do as it does about what an organization is going to do. Most organizations are notorious for never stopping, never ending any previous initiatives, just adding new ones. But a good strategic plan enables us to actually reallocate resources, taking resources away from things that have ceased to be strategic and allocating and concentrating them on things that can and should be more strategic. But it also doesn't serve as a substitute for leadership judgment. It provides a framework through which leaders can make better decisions. But even when we have the best laid plans, as James Clear said, we don't rise to the level of our goals and plans. We fall to the level of our systems. A good strategic growth system produces planned or predictable results year after year after year. Our strategic growth system borrows bits and pieces and elements from all of the resources that you see on the page here. If you don't have these 10 resources on your bookshelf or on your Kindle or your tablet, your e-reading device, my recommendation is you take a picture of this slide and you make sure that you get those. One cannot go wrong having all of these books in your library. And what I'm going to talk about next really borrows elements from all of these. You see, a good strategic growth system really answers 10 basic questions. And those 10 big questions really can be categorized into 3 overarching questions. Who are we? Where are we going? And how and when will we get there? Who are we? Where are we going? And how and when will we get there? The first 3 questions really fall under that first overarching question of who are we? That's the question of why do we exist? Why was our company placed on this earth to do? Which is also known as our mission statement. The second question is, what behavior is expected from everyone in the organization? How do we expect everyone to treat each other? How do we expect them to approach their work? And how do we expect them to behave on a day-to-day basis? Those are our core values. And generally, core values are internally focused on how we behave within the organization. Brand promise is a good representation of our customer-facing core value, and that's really described as what our clients expect from us. What do we want our clients to say? What do we want them to feel? How do we want them to experience an interaction with us? What do we want them to expect? That's our brand promise. The next 4 questions really revolve around that second, where are we going element of a strategic growth plan. Where are we going and when will we arrive? That's our vision and our strategy. What must we accomplish to get where we're going by the date we've planned? So a lot of people ask me, what's the ideal timeline or time frame for a good strategy or a good vision statement? And a good vision statement, by the way, is a specific destination at some point in the future that we seek to arrive with our company. So by 12/31, that's December 31st, 2027 or 2029, we will be blank. That's kind of the starting of a good vision statement. I like to suggest 3 to 5 year vision statements because vision statements, the world is changing so rapidly, particularly in a technology or a technology-enabled company. Everything changes so rapidly. Anything over about 3, 4, or 5 years, it's just too difficult to anticipate what the market's going to look like, what the technology is going to look like, what our customer base is going to look like, what the economy is going to look like. Ideally, I like 3-year vision statements, but some of my clients prefer 4 and 5-year vision statements. But I deeply, deeply caution clients from establishing vision statements that are any longer than 5 years. So let's say we go with a 3-year vision statement. The next question then is, what must we accomplish within that 3 years in order to get where we're going by the time that we've planned? What 5 to 7 things? Sometimes they're called strategic objectives. I like to refer to them as long-term targets. And I call them long-term targets because they actually create the image of an archer who's got his bow and arrow withdrawn, his bowstring withdrawn, his arrow pointed at the target, and he's either going to hit the bullseye or he's not. The next question then is, what must we accomplish in the next 12 months? These are more of our tactical actions, or what we call our short-term goals. And they should tie directly to those long-term targets and to the vision. And then what must we accomplish as a team and individually within the next 90 days? Some people call these rocks. We call them quarterly priorities. The reason we choose 90 days is, in my experience, it takes about 90 days for a new strategic growth plan to get off track. Something happens that distracts us, and we take our eye off the ball, and we don't look up until it's 7 or 8 or 10 months later. And then the last 3 questions have to do with how will we get there? Those are our key performance indicators in our scorecard, which are defined as the critical measures that we review on a weekly basis to keep our finger on the pulse of the organization. Key issues are what obstacles stand in our way and what do we have to do to resolve those. And finally, how are we going to assure 100% accountability? We do that with an accountability chart, as well as putting names by all of the quarterly priorities, all of the short-term goals, and all the long-term targets. We assign those to individuals. And we also have a weekly monitoring and review cadence that keeps us on track. When you look at it stacked up, it looks something like this. It's a top-down planning process to enable bottoms-up management. And it's surrounded by our key stakeholders, which could be our customers, our board members, our investors and shareholders. All of those constitute key stakeholders, and we have to constantly keep those in mind as we're building our strategic growth plan. This is an example of what it might look like on an annual basis, where we build out our plan, and then at the end of Q1 or the start of Q2, we review our quarterly priorities. How did we do against them? We establish new quarterly priorities for the following quarter, and we tackle any critical issues. We do the same thing at the end of Q2. We do the same thing at the end of Q3. Then when we get to the end of the year, we look at our Q4 quarterly priorities. We review our accountability chart. We revalidate and or refine our vision if we need to, because things change within a 12-month period. We look at our long-term targets and we make sure they're still accurate. We establish new short-term goals for the coming 12 months, new quarterly priorities, and we make any refinements or adjustments to our KPIs. Then we start the process all over again. So we move quarter to quarter to quarter, staying on top of and keeping our finger on the pulse. We also have a weekly meeting cadence with our executive team that ensures that we stay on track as well. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to fight the whirlwind. We're trying to fight the things that distract us from accomplishing that which we need to focus on. So we focus on the wildly important goals, which are our long-term targets and our short-term goals. And I like to call these the vital few versus the trivial many, because it's not 30 things that we have to do. It's 5 to 7, maybe 10. It's an exercise in subtraction, not an exercise in addition. We use the 80-20 principle. What are the 20% of the things that are going to get us 80% of the results? We then use leverage by acting on the lead indicators, the leading indicators, the lead measures called KPIs, key performance indicators. Our lead measures are the actions and sub-goals that predict the success of our long-term targets and our short-term goals. We make sure that everyone remains committed and engaged. engaged and committed teammates. Remember that from the culture of excellence. And we do that by keeping a compelling scoreboard and communicating how we're doing on a regular basis, because people play harder and they play more seriously when we're keeping score. And then finally, we create a cadence of accountability, a laser-like guidance system that helps us avoid distraction, helps us to concentrate on activities that produce the greatest results. And we meet on a weekly basis and on a quarterly basis at the same time, every week, every quarter. That meeting time and that meeting cadence is what we call sacrosanct, which means too important or valuable to be interfered with. So that's my presentation for today. This is my direct email address, jeffs@innovationjunkie.com. My direct website is jeffstandridge.com, and I'm also very active on LinkedIn. I would love for any of you to reach out to me at any time on LinkedIn and or reach out to me via email if I can be of service to you. And so with that, Victor, I'm going to stop sharing, and maybe we can answer some questions along the way.
I mean, Jeff, you deserve a huge round of applause. Can I see the applause come out from the participants? I think that was explosive. And how you were able to put that together in 30 minutes, I really don't know how you did it, but that was amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. And for me, very, very strong presentation and some key callouts, which I think speaks to the core of what we do in the startup ecosystem. We bet on teams and not on individuals, okay? And that's what a lot of startups do not understand. It's not just one superhuman person that the investors will put their monies behind. And you said that aptly by saying, surround yourself with the right leaders who can get the job done. And I think that was profound. You should not be the only leader. You need to have a company of leaders. You guys are together, and that's when investors' money can come behind you. And I think that's wonderful. Culture of excellence.
Victor, let me say one more thing about that. So there's this thing called the founder's curse. And the founder's curse says that the value of your company is inversely proportional to how dependent that company is on you to make it successful.
Oh, wow. So the more dependent they are on you, the less valuable the company is.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
That's exactly right.
So I think that's key. In this part of the world also, we're very big on relational, much more than results. I've had the privilege of schooling and working in different cultural organizations, Switzerland, different parts of the world. And I know that the culture in Africa is usually so soft, but you captured it happily. We need to balance relationship and results because, like you said, when you keep the results, people play harder, people play better.
That's right.
And so I think that is, and of course, you make strong emphasis on creating a culture of excellence. That's how we improve our world. And because to a large extent, it's about making sure that we create a very strong culture that breeds excellence. Thank you so much. I mean, there is quite a number of nuggets. And even for me, I was scribbling and I couldn't just catch up. I know I have to go back. A friend who also, I think he runs also Skill Up, good friend Manoj. He had to drop off the call. He had dropped a message about what they do, and he was already asking that he wanted to see the presentation. He leads also a big innovation firm in Manchester in the UK, and Manoj is on the call. Yeah. So again, thanks for that session. But I think we'll quickly dive into the questions. And I'm sure as we discuss the questions, I'm sure there'll be a couple more questions that will come up that makes it. Again, most 80% of our listeners are actually from Africa. And so you'll find that there's some contextual things which they might be asking, which you would think, oh, this should be given, but really it's because our people are African and of course the context differs. So someone here says, what role do strategic partnerships play in ensuring the long-term success of a startup? How can startups identify the right partners? Okay, want to speak to that?
Yeah, great question. So it really depends. I mean, I know some startups that really don't have a dependence or a reliance on strategic partnerships. Depending on how you define strategic partnerships, but the concept of partnership, in my experience, is always a positive one. So we should always be looking for, we don't always have to buy everything. There's this concept of build, buy, or partner. Yeah. And so what I like to suggest you do is look at the things where you can, your core competence is to build it.
Mm-hmm.
It's critical to your business. It's part of your core competency as a business. Um, if it's not part of your core competency, maybe you need to buy it, and that can be through an acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
or through buying a service or a vendor capability. And then there may be other instances, usually on the business development front, or maybe an aspect to your product or service where you could partner with someone in a
Okay.
mutually beneficial partnership. I do believe that one of the single greatest things, just like you want to hire employees, and I know we've got a question related to this in a few moments. You want to hire employees that are a good fit culturally for your organization. You want to do the same thing with your partners and make sure that they are a good cultural fit. Because
Right.
if you're not willing to hold your partners accountable for the culture, how are you really able to hold your employees accountable for the same culture?
Wow, wow. Thank you. That's quite profound. So again, it's the same mentality, the same mindset for which you get business partners and get employees. That's how you should have your partners. Thank you so much. I think that was quite clear. From another platform, someone says, can you share insights on how leaders can effectively manage and lead through a crisis
Yeah,
situation without compromising on the long-term vision? And I think this again takes us back to what we've done the last 5 years. We've been
yeah,
firefighting from regional
sure.
tensions to COVID to supply chain linkages, to mass resignations, to a couple of things, and then high inflation rates, which you think the Feds are now being caught, and we see it's tapering globally. It's been a crisis period in the last 4 years. Question is, how do you manage without
Mhm.
compromising the long-term vision of a startup?
So I said a few moments ago that a good strategic growth plan doesn't replace leadership, doesn't take the place of leadership.
Mm,
It creates a framework through which to make better decisions. And so let's say that a potential opportunity presents itself,
mm,
or a potential crisis presents itself. I think the process should really be the same. The first thing we need to do is step back and look at our vision of the company and our strategic growth plan, and we say, does if it's a new opportunity, we say, is this new opportunity consistent with who we said we want to be in the next 3 years, consistent with
mhm,
our strategic growth plan? The answer may be yes, it fits squarely within our strategic growth plan, so therefore we should do it. The answer may be no, it doesn't fit within our strategic growth plan, and so we shouldn't do it. But the
mhm,
answer might also be no, it doesn't fit within our strategic growth plan, but we created this plan 14 months ago, and we didn't anticipate the changes in the market, the changes
mhm.
in the economy, the changes in the inflation rate. And
Yeah.
so maybe we need to revisit our strategic growth plan, right? Number
Oh,
one. If it
yeah.
happens to be a crisis, we ought to go through the same process and say, can we still achieve our strategic growth plan, all elements of our strategic growth plan, and manage this crisis at the same time? And if the answer is yes, then we should do that. If the answer is, well, no, then say, well, what parts of our strategic growth plan that are most important can we continue to execute on? And which ones do we need to maybe table for now so that we can also manage the crisis? There was a story in the scriptures of Nehemiah who was building the wall with one hand while he
And
was fighting off the enemies with the other hand, right?
yeah,
And sometimes we have to become Nehemiah, so to speak.
yeah. Thank you. Quite illustrative, and I think that gets the message home. It's combining both an operational capability and a dynamic capability at the same time. You're playing with both left and right leg. You're building for the future and building for the present, and I think that's interesting. There's something about capitalization. I'm trying to really understand what this person is saying. I know capitalization is a huge challenge, but how do you match tech inclined capitalization offers to the arts and creative industry? I'm trying to see, what can this person try?
Yeah, it
He's
looks like
trying
they're
to track
saying that so much
capitalization. Yeah.
money, so much investment is going toward tech companies.
Mhm.
How do you get it more toward the arts and creative industries?
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and that's a good question. My experience is money follows great ideas,
True.
and great ideas where there is a market, and doing the customer discovery and making sure that your product or service, irrespective of whether it's tech oriented or it's arts or creative oriented, if you've done the customer discovery, you've quantified the market, and you've built a solution that addresses the biggest needs within that market, the money will follow.
Thank you. Thank you. That was concise. Money follows ideas. There's a question around balancing innovation with managing corporations, which I think I was saying earlier. It's about how do you build for the future while ensuring that you keep your eyes on today? What are the limitations of a data-driven decision making, and how can we address them? Do you want to
Yep,
take that?
sure. So innovation should be a process.
Mm,
I
mm,
define innovation as planned change directed at better ways of doing things than we're currently doing them. That's effectively my definition. Planned change. So often, organizations forget that innovation should be planned change. And
mm,
someone gets an idea and they immediately start pursuing that idea and trying to execute that idea without doing the planned part of it. And so
mm,
we start by identifying the problem we're trying to solve. It's a process. What's the problem we're trying to solve, or what's the opportunity we're trying to seize? Once we articulate the problem or the opportunity, then our
mm.
next question is, do we have any quantitative evidence of that problem or opportunity, and how big is it? And do the stats and facts and statistics support the problem that we've articulated? Then we go and
Yeah.
actually qualify it by talking to our key stakeholders as well.
Mhm.
And so we usually find that once we've
That-
done that, what we
mhm,
thought the problem was is
mhm,
only about 60% accurate.
mhm.
About 40% of our assumptions were inaccurate or were erroneous. And so we have to make sure we're doing the planned element of that.
Yeah, I think it's that iterative process, keep iterating and iterating, that I think people need to learn to make a part of their business processes.
Mhm.
If you don't build for the future or you don't anticipate change, then change ultimately is going to happen to you. But of course, there's anything that's
For
certain,
sure.
is that industries will be disrupted, change will come. It's a more dynamic world that we've ever had, and so we need to make sure that innovation is a major, it's a core part of our strategic growth plan, and,
Mhm.
and I think that's important. Um, but somebody is now concerned about limitations of data-driven decision making. I think we do see a lot of that, especially when we have multinational firms or global startups coming to Africa, and they have the global research agencies, Ipsos, and AC Nielsen, Cantor do their research, and then they come in to operate, based on research which has been done by someone else, and it's just data. And I think this person is trying to ask, what do you see as the downside of taking decisions just based on data, and what do
Well,
you yeah.
yeah. So I think I like to use the word evidence-based decision making, right?
Okay,
Data is one form of evidence. Observations is another form of evidence.
great.
Experience is another form of evidence.
Mm,
Qualitative feedback from customers are another form of evidence. And so I like to suggest that we're looking at, I mean, statistics lie occasionally, right? We
yeah.
have to we have to know that if we're just looking at the ones and zeros, we're just looking at the bits and bytes, we can be led astray. We have to interpret that data with our experiences, with our observations, with our customer feedback. And so evidence-based decision making is a much, much better approach than just data-driven decisioning. And so that's the way I would suggest that we go about the problem solving.
Thank you. So it's moving away from just pure data decision making to evidence based, and I think this is a
That's right.
new one for me. I think evidence based, more robust, more nuanced, and I think that gives better holistic feedback for decision making. Evidence based decision making. I do hope our listeners are picking on that. The final question this evening. We've got about 7 minutes to wrap up, and I'll take on questions. So the final question: what qualities should startup founders look for in their team members to ensure they can contribute to the long-term success of the business?
Mhm.
Qualities you should look for, the leaders should look for in their team members to
Sure.
ensure they can contribute to the long-term success of the business.
So that's a great question. And what I would say is once you've determined that they meet the requirements, the experience and education or experience requirements for the job, in other words, this person has the skills to fit this job, we really have to make sure that they are a cultural fit for the organization.
Mm,
You can train skills.
mhm,
It is very, very difficult to retrain someone to be a cultural fit. Jack Welch, who was the CEO of GE a few years ago, said, if you've got someone in your organization who's struggling to succeed, but they're a cultural fit for the organization, you probably just have the wrong combination of skills and responsibilities and tasks. Move them
Mm,
around, massage the job role, because they're a long-term potential player in the organization. If
mm.
you have someone who has all the skills and they're performing extremely well, but they're a cultural mismatch, they're breaking relationships, they're not behaving in a manner that's commensurate with the way we want people to behave, he said you really have to get rid of them immediately because they will ultimately spoil everyone around them. So the
Wow.
qualities we should be looking for is, yeah, we want to make sure that they fit the job. We also want to make sure that they have the self-directed learning skills to learn new skills as the job changes. But
Mm-hmm.
the single greatest important thing, and this will go back and answer one of the questions we didn't get a chance to answer, is when you're interviewing people, you should have interview questions, open-ended interview questions, experience-based or behaviorally based, that tie to every one of your core values. If one of your core values is integrity or do the right thing, then you should have a question that says, tell me about a time in a work setting where you feel like you
Mm-hmm.
were being pressured to do something that you didn't feel comfortable doing. Tell me what the
Wow.
situation was and tell me how you handled it. Right.
Mm.
And that's a way to assess for those core values.
Beautiful, and I think apt. There's this. I mean, for me, it's the answers are quite spot on, and they're quite actually actionable. So, and I'm sure that for many of our listeners, as I was scribbling down here, I'm sure quite a number of people will be scribbling. But Jeff, we do have a lot of respect for your time, and we know that we had discussed that it's just an hour's conversation, but we look forward to engaging with you in the future. I want to say a big thank you to Jeff. You've done a
For sure.
phenomenal job. We're seeing quite a number of feedbacks across other platforms that we're streaming. And I see people still throwing in questions. We'll see how we get to answer that, because again, it's integrity of what we do is when we tell people we want to run a program from 5 to 6, we want to make sure it's from 5 to 6. It's mutual respect for both the listeners and the viewers. But here again, the beauty of it, all this recording, as well as all the 112th recordings of this webinar session and this interaction and question answering sessions and the questions that were asked, you will find it on our website by 12 noon tomorrow. We'll edit tonight and make sure it's on there. So all you have to do, my colleagues are dropping the link in the chat. Go to www.echoicenter.com/webinar, and you will find Jeff's presentation, his feedback, and his conversations there, and he's dropped a chat. I mean, he's dropped his LinkedIn handle there. Please, let's reach out. Let's follow him on LinkedIn. Let's connect with him, and I'm sure he'll drop all on handles to other platforms where he wants you to connect. Let's feel free to, and then we can engage, because again, that's the way we can continue to learn and get mentored from afar. Most of the people that mentored me are from, I mean, many of them I've never met, but I've got my libraries full of their books, Power of Execution, all that. I follow their posts on LinkedIn. That's how you get mentored. You can get mentored even from afar. So make sure you follow. He's got 3 decades of experience, for crying out loud, doing what we are just learning to do. So make sure you benefit from this. These are the giants on whose shoulders you need to stand to conquer your world. They've conquered a couple of these things. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Learn. And Jeff, of course, we look forward to following you. I want to say a big thank you. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the insightful way you answered the questions. And I'm sure our listeners were quite impressed and appreciate the fact that we're there. We're grateful as a team. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Victor,
And to
thank
every
you so
person
much.
that was
My pleasure. My pleasure as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And for every other person, again, this was coming from the stable of Eco Innovation Center located in Lagos, Nigeria. And of course, our work spans across Africa as we champion public sector innovation and civic tech. We understand the fact that Africa still needs to evolve and develop in so many structures that needs to create the right environment for its people. And we've chosen this part of the tech ecosystem to do that. And our commitment is to work with startups who are doing things around public innovation and civic tech, moving them from ideation to scale up, and of course, finally commercialization. And so feel free to follow us on our handles. My colleagues have dropped it. Join us in our forum. We've got about 3,000 participants. We engage on a day-to-day basis. The link is in there. It's called the Techbiz Nation, where myself and so many ecosystem leaders will continue to engage you, share opportunities with you, share insights, share tips, give you invites for webinars like this that we have, subject matter expert like Jeff coming. That's where you get the invites to be on the Zoom platform while others are being streamed. I can ask your questions. And so feel free people are just joining at 5. We've ended. Feel free to be a part of this and get the recording and join the group. Again, we've got a couple of programs coming up. The Agri-Innovation Summit. We're looking at how to rethink agriculture and make Africa improve food sustainability in Africa. Sustainability is the hallmark. With climate change and all that, we're having farmer-headed crisis. We need to move from very rudimental ways of feeding our people to being able to use technology to change the way we do agriculture. Agri-Innovation Summit is happening October 31st. We're partnering with the government to do this summit. We're going to be giving out grants and giving out seed funds for people. Make sure you register and attend. And the largest tech event happening also with the national, all the national players and policymakers, Art of Technology 6.0 is coming up in October. If you've not registered, register to be a speaker, register to be a sponsor, register to be a partner, and of course, you can register to exhibit. It comes up 5th and 6th of December. Again, I want to say thank you to you for keeping a date with us in Eco Innovation Center. And we do not take this for granted that you give us an hour of your time every month to be a part of this, where we listen to subject matter experts help us on our journey of building global startups who can stand the test of time and who can be able to impact our world. Thank you very much for being a part of this, and I remain your host, Victor Gbenga Folabi, the founder of Eco Innovation, saying thank you for joining and looking forward to hosting you next month again on another episode of Techbiz series. Thank you and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Jeff, for your time. We're grateful.